Hello, my name is Carla Lopez, and today I will be talking about North America with the indigenous tribes that were there before Columbus and also before European influence. So, one of the things was they had a very agricultural way of life, so they were always doing trial and error, testing out many hypotheses they had, just trying to see which plants worked best under certain circumstances and also the land they had there. They also domesticated many food plants, so they would grow crops such as squash and corn and just see which crops would grow best in certain weather, the land, and the time of year as well. So they were using many science skills like testing out their predictions and just seeing which ones would work best. They also did farming, so just as a way of life and trying to get food for themselves to survive. They also use many Neolithic skills. So what that means is that they would use stone as tools to hunt for them. And so they would do engineering there, just doing something to help them live and get more food and to help them hunt. Also, the villages were very economically self-contained, so they would just keep it within themselves and grow their own crops and sell to themselves and whatnot. And yeah, so like I said, they were always experimenting with plants and just trying to find a great way to live with these indigenous tribes before Columbus.
My name's Shelby Mahler, and the part I will be talking about is social context. It was only about 500 years ago when the Americas were completely transformed and Christopher Columbus set foot on what was once a world of unbelievable natural wealth. The current natives who had ruled these lands before were surrounded by dense oceans and forests that were filled with wildlife. There were lush jungles in South America, tall glaciers in the Arctic North, and the Great Plains thundered with large herds across North America. Many of the wild animals that were hunted and used for survival consisted of caribou, antelope, and bison. In 1492, the Americas were also a very crowded and prosperous place, and it was an ancient world that was inhabited by almost 100 million people. Many of these people consisted of hunters, gatherers, fishermen, farmers, kings, slaves, and soldiers. A lot of the native tribes were diversified into hundreds of culturally distinct tribes. Some of these cultures spread into agricultural ways, others were pastoral. The natives had large cities that were used as trading centers made from earth and wood and had populations up to thousands of people. Their first and main crops was corn and potatoes, and it was soon to be man's first step into genetic engineering, as it was a big part of their culture. As hunting goes, the Native Americans, unlike the Europeans, had no guns or horses, so they would hunt these animals like bison on foot. And as compared to European culture, the fishing was not done for the industry, as rather it was for the taking. The people occupying this land spoke many different languages and lived in many different social systems. Many cultures at this time involved heavy religion and religious ceremonies. For example, the Aztecs, for them, the turkey was vital, and it was so important that they devoted 2 different religious festivals to it. Many native groups had their own cultural religious practices before Europeans came and forced Christianity. As we can see, the social context of one's given situation can affect how one speaks, acts, and what they preach about, as it all depends on their current social and physical environment.
My name is Jacqueline Moltes, and I'm always speaking about evidence of claims. There is evidence for the plant domestication. They were trying to better their crops, and in some way they're modifying and changing it. Also, there is evidence of the slash and burn, or just the burning of the field for the agriculture. The land was losing its nutrients, therefore they did want to kind of rebuild it to be able to reuse it. Also, the stone tools. Many of us have seen them in museums, so we know that there has been proof of stone tools that were used back then for their hunter-gathering, survival, killing of small animals. They were just in their everyday use, those stone tools. Also, the proof of the cities that was talked about by Shelby previously. about how these cities were used for trade centers. They were very large. And also for the plant domestication, there is evidence that has been written on the caves of some places where they talk about the process and what they were doing.
Hi, my name is Isabella Magana, and I'm going to be discussing historic origins to our indigenous people. And so, I'm going to focus on the Anasazi because I find them the most interesting and I think they're amazing. So, what we do know about the Anasazi is that their region extended from Arizona to New Mexico, which is quite a long way on foot. Remember, they don't have cars, they don't have anything like that. Like, this is pre-1400s. So, that's a long way to be established on foot. They had really interesting high buildings, and I was reading an article, and they're all preserved, not all, but most of them are preserved through national parks and things like that. So I was reading this article about archaeologists who were now going to those, and to get a better understanding, they are going up them, but they aren't allowed to use their climbing gear because it could damage the structure, and so they had to scale it like an Anasazi would. And apparently this one man said that there were just cliffs, that there would be a path that would just lead to a cliff, or there would be really skinny, narrow regions where you had to go against the wall to get there. And so making trips down to go get water or to go get food or even just go down to the ground level could cost you your life if you make a careless mistake, which I think is absolutely wild and so fascinating. But we also don't know why they left this region. They left their structures because they're carved into rock and things like that. But there has been oral history through all the Pueblo people for generations, and they have reasons for why they left the regions, but they have been a highly guarded secret until now. So the past 10 years we've been making discoveries about why they left, and there's things like violence and war and cannibalism that led them to leave this region and eventually led to their destruction and their downfall. So I find them extremely interesting, and I guess we get a little bit of historic knowledge. We understand the groups better of why we have these structures and how it related to back then. And so next is going to be Kiana talking about how this relates to the current events that are happening today.
Hello, my name is Kiana Looney, and I will be talking about the connections to current events in North America during the pre-Columbus time period. During the pre-Columbus time period in North America, there were many things that happened in which they can be connected to with the current events in North America today. Although there are so many connections that can be made to North America during this time period, the main connection I'm going to be focusing on is the agriculture and how they gathered their food. Around the time of 1491, agriculture was the way of life for the Mesoamericans, the Inca Empire, and the Aztecs. They were farmer and hunter-gatherers. The Mesoamericans had domesticated animals such as horses to pull plows, pigs, which were the main source of meat and leather, sheep and mules that would pull carts, cows, which provided meat, fur, hides, milk, butter, and cheese, and goats, which also provided milk, butter, and cheese. The Mesoamericans were farmers. They had a stable crop, and the first thing they learned to grow was corn, which was used to build their civilization. The Inca Empire were also farmers, but they would farm in exchange for gold, so they would harvest potatoes. They grew corn and potatoes, but they didn't have any animals. They only had one animal, which was a llama, and they used that for transportation and hide. The Aztecs were hunters. Bison was their main source of food and clothing. The Native Americans did not have any guns or horses, so they would have to hunt on foot, and they would use a bow and arrow or spear, which they made. These things were an essential for survival. The Europeans, on the other hand, were hunters and fishermen during the time. They would hunt for sport with guns, but their main food source was fish, in which they would get from the ocean. During that time, farming, hunting, and fishing was a way of life for these people. Today in North America, those things can be connected to the lives of the people today. There were so many people today who still live by this lifestyle of farming, fishing, and hunting. for survival, and for sport. Today, most people get their food from a grocery store, but behind all that are farmers, fishermen, and hunters to provide it for us. For the most part, a majority of the people in North America do these things just like they did back then during the pre-Columbus time period. This concludes our project about the STEM work on North America during the pre-Columbus time period. We hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.